Fratoni. All right, there we go. So this session is the 21st Century Family Engagement Ecosystem presented by Joseph Fratoni. Fratoni has 30 plus years experience improving the communication and coordination of people in order to get things accomplished. He is the driving force behind One Green Apple's licensed protected intellectual property and has been recognized as a leader in the area of quantifying family engagement and its effect on student performance. Over the past decade, Mr. Fratoni has spent countless hours working with educators, parents, and policy leaders throughout the United States. This experience has helped him to understand the commonality of issues regarding family engagement, as well as the subtle nuances specific to regions, groups, and constituencies. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Fratoni.
Great. Well, thank you, Sherry. I really appreciate that. Obviously, what we're talking about is the 21st century.
Why is my thing not working?
Pardon? Somebody is turning off their mic, maybe. But anyway, about the 21st century family engagement ecosystem. And with that, let me just kind of start about, see that this goes. Let me just tell you a little bit about One Green Apple. Our mission is to strengthen the parent's voice in the education of their child and measure the resulting students' achievement and improvement. The idea being is that we're very metric based. I'm very analytical. I'm not here to tell parent coordinators and all you guys and women who have been in the trenches for so long and everything else how to do your job. You already know that. What I'm really looking about and what we're really going to be talking about is the bigger picture and how do we evolve this so that we actually get more things accomplished, I guess is the best way to do that. And one of the best ways I think to do is just very quickly is to kind of recap what I call the business side of education, and the value of family engagement, because I think sometimes we don't really fully appreciate where family engagement fits into the big picture. And it's not only that you might not appreciate this, it may also be within your entire district and community. Okay. So here's how a superintendent has to look at the at the business, if you will, of looking at schools. Basically, we need money. Healthy cash flows allow for greater flexibility, which allows for better programs, which then instill more students, which then helps with the cash flow. So in order to do this, we need to maximize all our resources and make sure that we keep things going. Number one is student retention. Because then you have a steady budget, you know exactly where you're at, if you will. And the keys to keeping that come down to really two things. Number one, student performance, because that's how districts are measured in every which way, if you will, and parent satisfaction, that they're happy with what's going on and where things are at. They do this through something called performance-based management, which is basically managing the performance, which is exactly what it says, by analyzing data and having the data to be able to look at this. This is why you see all these concepts about testing and everything else about student performance. It's tied to financial viability of the school district at will. And if we look further, more money is spent at the at-risk student. That's where we need to focus on that. We use data to drive instruction, which drives achievement, which then helps the school district overall. However, one of the things is family engagement is really, in the grand scheme of things, considered only a tool to improve performance. One of the problems is we don't have as many metrics or analytics as we need to really make it viable. You can't manage, how do you measure family engagement? If you can't manage what you can't measure, if it's not measurable, it's not fundable. And that becomes an issue because family engagement is way more important than just looking at the child. In order to do this properly, everybody needs to get the information they need to support student success. Parents need to see information that we really don't give them, and that teachers are afraid, for lack of a better expression, to give them because they're afraid of the pushback. But if we do give this information, it promotes role-based responsibility, and it also helps develop accountability, which is really important to understand where things are at. In order to know where there are problems, you need to see where things are existing so that you can make a baseline to adjust where you need to be, if you will. So how did we get here? Basically, the way I look at this is that In most districts, family engagement is underutilized. We all know parent involvement is important in a child's success. Teacher effectiveness is compromised by the lack of family engagement. But even if the parent of the non-risk child, of the at-risk child wants to help, many times they don't know how. They don't have the skill set. They don't have the technology. They were at risk themselves. How do we, they come from a different culture. Life is really hard. How do we break this systemic cultural issue that develops that what's now been called so many times the achievement gap, but even is even greater than that? How do we really make this, change? And if you think about it, over the past, how many times have you heard the system's broken and we can't keep throwing money at the problem? We can't keep throwing, the system's broken, we can't keep throwing money at the problem. Smaller class sizes, better trained teachers, better facilities, even school choice have not delivered on the promise or the investment over the past 40 years. Something must have changed. And we believe, in One Green Apple, we believe this is family engagement. So let's look at how does this all kind of develop. Most of our engagement has all been developed under a leave it to Beaver mentality. And this is how people see it. Beaver has a problem and Miss Landers calls up Mrs. Cleaver, who goes out in the yard and talks to Ward. And in 30 minutes, things are all resolved and we learned a lesson as well as Beaver. So what's wrong with this picture? Well, number one, Miss Landers is busy, busier than she's ever been at all. Mrs. Cleaver's traded in her pearls and she's working full time. More and more, Mr. and Mrs. Cleaver don't even speak the same language as Miss Landers. And in most of the families, Mr. Cleaver is not even there. Systems are broken. The nuclear family doesn't really exist. Yolanda Anderson, I remember talking to her. She was prior to Regina Thurman, had given me a statistic about South Carolina that said 31% of all households in South Carolina are led by a single mother, and another 7% were led by a single father. That means close to 40% of the families in South Carolina do not fit into the quote nuclear family. And that's a problem. We need to address these issues, obviously, that you're familiar with this. It's a lot greater challenge, but it has an even bigger effect because our communities are only as strong as our families are. And our kids do not leave where they grew up. And if they are better educated, the community grows as well. In fact, at Pepperdine University, a conservative think tank has even said opportunities for families, including single parent and struggling families, to genuinely participate in their child's education provides the only means by which communities and lives can be rebuilt. Children settle on the way to success in their jobs and, more importantly, in their community. I bring this up to show that there is a lot more importance to this than just worrying about or thinking about at the granular level each student. In the grand big picture, something has to change if we're going to have a greater impact. At the same time, and this is coming from the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement, these are what their findings are. Number one, when we talk about school reform, no one brings up family engagement as much. And they do it now, and now it's kind of polarized and maybe going in the wrong direction. But professionals are also isolated. Parent coordinators and the entire parent coordination concept are kind of pushed to the side from the difference between just the teacher-parent relationship. And I think that should be turned around to the parent-teacher partnership, which we'll talk about further. Few organizations give family engagement the priority it exists. And I will venture to say, go out to your school district, go out to the website of your school district. And at the top, see where it says family engagement. If family engagement is so important, why isn't it there? Why isn't it easier to get to who they need to speak to? That is a key to kind of look at that. And a lot of studies have said educators, the teachers, are really unprepared to engage families. Dr. Anderson brought up a lot of good points about how teachers aren't able to handle certain things and they need more professional development. Somebody made the comment in that says, this should be shown to the teachers. Parent coordinators should be showing this to the teachers. And we'll talk further about that later on. A strong body of research shows that family engagement matters. However, we all know what we're supposed to be doing, but we know it's really, really expensive. So that's not what we spend our money on. Conventional methods take too much time, energy, in cost. In fact, because it's not measurable, not enough money goes to it other than basically Title I funds. And this is a study, coming from the National Center for Education Statistics and Title I, that out of the average of a $14,400 per school year spent on a K-12 student, less than $10 is spent in family engagement. That makes absolutely no sense. So you know why we don't get much impact? There's not enough funds in here. Why aren't there enough funds in there? Because there's no metrics to understand how valuable this job is. So how do we change that? Well, first of all, let's look at what's been going on. The past few years have been so tragic. I'm only going to spend one slide on this, but basically plans, one of the lessons we've learned, plans can be dashed quickly, things change and everybody is overwhelmed. The teachers, administrators, and families in particular. And because of this, we're seeing greater disparities in achievement gap that can't be ignored. We're never going back to the way it was. And do we really want to go back to the way it was? Some of the lessons we've learned from this is, number one, the role of families in education is increasing. It is more noticeable. There is additional funds being available for this, both through ESSER, and if you're familiar with ESSA and the 1%, lots of this stuff, which also means that parent coordinators can have a greater impact if the position is redrawn structurally in order to make these things work. Everyone knows we've got these greater challenges. How are we going to do all this extra work? And from a parent coordinator standpoint, how do we make the most of our time? We're limited on that. We're responsible for all our families, but yet if we spend it where we needed the most and we ignore others, it's going to hurt our performance evaluation. How do we spread our performance? How do we make this work? And I kind of bring up very quickly, I'm sure a lot of people here have heard about the argument between equality and equity. And we've all seen this picture too, I'm sure. And if not, I'll explain it very, very quickly, of the soap boxes being resources. And if we spread it properly, equally, not everybody is served properly. But if we look at to where everyone's at in a different way, we're able to give everyone the opportunity of a level playing field to grow. And that's really the key, is giving everybody the opportunity, obviously, to learn. So how do we do this? The key is finding the right balance that promotes the most benefit, not only to the community, but to yourself. How do we maximize getting things done? And there's one way that I think is if we can make it so cost effective across the board and show that, that's how you get the resources, and that's what we need to do. If there's any questions, feel free to throw them in chat and I will kind of go in there. So at One Green Apple, we kind of went beyond the research and we started looking at what we call strengthening the parent-teacher partnership. If a parent has a problem, they don't go to the parent coordinator first. They're going to the teacher. That's where the issues are, right? And really, we all talk about that, but we look at that in order to make that partnership work, we need to build this on 4 pillars. Number one is moving parents up what we call, or the parent engagement curve. And I'll spend a little bit more time on that, but basically the parent engagement curve is moving parents along the way so that they're all at different levels to really where they become an effective partner. We also have to elevate the role of the parent as a partner, which is really a requirement both in ESSA and everywhere else. But how do we do this? The teachers and the schools have more data than the parents. How do we get the parents the information they need without, issues with FERPA, if you will, and every other darn thing? We need building trust and communications, stuff that we can validate and see and where this is going. And probably the biggest key is measuring and correlating that engagement to achievement. And that achievement can be both student performance, attendance, et cetera. And if we can have those metrics, then we can start restructuring this entire family engagement program to make it much more successful and to show where we need to go with this. So this is where I'm talking about the parent engagement curve. Right now, if you look at the far lower hand corner, there's nothing there. Teachers send things home one way, there's an information. Parents have questions, they send things back, and it's bi-directional. And most parent communication systems kind of stop here, but here's where the key is. We talk past each other. Teachers use a different language than the parents. the parents have other issues and it's not really being seen. But if we could get to the point where they can understand each other, that the teacher can see the insights from home, what's going on with this child, at the same time that the parent can see their child in context the way the teachers see them. You know, my Johnny is an angel. Yes, but I have a classroom of 20 angels, you know. Then we can have a dialogue. And if that dialogue happens, well, then we can really start collaborating and just design really simple little tweaks, which we call designing strategy, that eventually goes to, you know, getting feedback from what we did. And then we have the traditional feedback loop where we hear something back, we assess what we do, we come up with new ideas, and then we execute those, and then we assess it again. And when you have that loop, you've really gotten to the point where you're able to develop what we would call a real parent-teacher partnership. And it's how, the idea is to move parents up that path. How do we get there? Well, what does a parent look like when they're engaged? And it's almost, as I go down these questions, they get more and more engaged. Number one is, how is my child doing? That they find that education is important in their lives, that they want their child to succeed. Number two, how are they doing? How's my child doing according to their abilities? You know, my expectations. I know my child. I'm better at some, less than others. And that's really an important thing to be able to see. Whoops, went back there. Then we start saying, how's my child doing? How does it fit in with the rest of the class? Is this too easy? Is this too hard? You know, I've only got one third grader, you've got 60. You know, this is really important to see, you know. And then finally, as I understand it's a community, it's how are my expectations being met in relation to all the other parents? Am I the crazy one, or are we all upset? And that's really where you start looking at, you know, like, which is we want to see too. And that's when you really start having that interested parent communication. You start building a parent community, et cetera. And that's the real positive of where we need to go with this. So based upon all this, you know, we can't just keep doing the same things over and over again and expect improvement. We'll just work ourselves into the ground. We need to look at family engagement from a different perspective. And I'm also going to show this from a technology standpoint. When we think of parent engagement tools, parent engagement technology, think of Remind. Think of all those other things that out there that we know. As one principal at a middle school in Florence one told me was, Remind is like a Band-Aid when you need stitches. It covers the problem, but it really doesn't do anything. And the reason for that is most of these platforms are teacher-centric. They sit there and they talk to the parent. They actually make teachers do more work. And the teachers are already overwhelmed. We look at this, you know, One Green Apple, and we have a platform we call Opus. We make the parents the centric point on this. It's serving the family, and then everything else works. But it's not just that relationship with the teachers. If we do that, we're missing a much larger picture. There are more people involved in family engagement: the parent coordinator, the community-based organizations, IT, which makes things run, and hopefully we're at the table too, kind of like the scorekeeper, if you will, the statistician in a football game. We don't do the strategy, we can, but we can give you lots of data, if you will. And this is kind of key to see this, but this is even only the first round. From there, we even have additional people. Besides the teacher, you've got guidance counselors, faculty advisors, you know, coaches, even the homeroom teacher, if you will. Everybody has a piece touching that student and the ability to see, if you will, that parent. From the parent coordinator, you know, I'm looking at changing this role to really an administrative position much higher, almost like the principal's representative for family engagement, as well as the district, if you will. As we know, a lot of the issues in family that affect education are beyond the purview of the educational system, like housing and shelter and food and, you know, a less stressful life for the child. And a lot of this comes from a community-based organizations. And how do we make all of these things work together? That's the key. Well, that's the beauty with technology. We've always looked at point solutions for family engagement and everything else. We have, and we talk about is a family engagement management platform across the board. And basically it's communication and analytics. And we do this in a non-invasive manner behind the scenes. And what I'm going to do is just give a very quick demo of just what the parents see. And if you give me 1 second, I'm going to see if I can't share my iPhone in a second. And I'll show you what a parent sees, and you'll get the idea of how quickly this works. Because as you said, even if the parent of the at-risk child wants to help, a lot of times the technology is beyond them. The parent portal, the typical PowerSchool parent portal, is going to be beyond their ability. So I'll explain very quickly what you would be seeing, if you will. Okay, is basically when a parent logs in, they would get tiles of each one of their children. And when I click on the tile, it would bring up a little tiles of each one of her classes, and with a little icon of a person that's colored red, green, yellow based upon how they're doing in school. But at the same time, we then can look at how the child is doing based upon my expectations. And in the example that I use is that the girl, the June Leclerc, is has yellow in physical ed, and she's green in everything else, including history. But my daughter's not the greatest athlete. I just want her to pass gym, but she should be at the top of her class for history. And what we show is when a parent first logs in, they're pushed to a questionnaire that they answer. And you think about this: the school's got an SIS system, PowerSchool. The teachers have the grade book. If a parent's an equal partner in their child's success, where do they put their information? Nobody else asks for it. We do. And based upon those questions, we're able to make adjustments. So the parent puts down just what I just said about, where they would like the child to be in history, where they think in gym, et cetera. And so instead of looking at it just by the grades, I can also click on it and see how she's doing based upon my expectations. And I get happy faces where expectations are being met, and sad where they're not. Gym looks fine. History is not where I want it to be, which then becomes, I click on the history button on the classroom, and it brings up the entire classroom, all the kids in the classroom, aliased. All it is all the greens and the yellows and the reds with a highlight of which one is my child. So I can actually get to that third question, see my child in context to all the other kids. If parent satisfaction is based upon meeting parent expectations, I can click on and see the expectations for all the kids. And I get all the happy faces in the same order where expectations are being met, sad where they're not, and gray circles where there's no family engagement. And that's really a powerful statement because parents can see where they're at. My child was first in her class and I wasn't happy. I realize I'm an idiot and I can turn that off. And there's lots of other different features we do that makes this really, really easy to work with. Behind the scenes, I can capture information where I can look at the grade point average of the students where the families are engaged versus where they're not, and show you that delta, that value of family engagement, even down to the classroom level. The beauty of this is, from a parent standpoint, they haven't even seen a number. It's really easy. A parent with a second grade education can see this, like we see things like, instantaneously, and they can understand it. And when they understand what's going on and they're being treated with respect, they feel better about things. Then when I want to talk to the teacher, then I click a button and it becomes that texting system. But we do something called dynamic translation. Teacher sends a note in English, the parent receives it in Spanish or their native tongue. They answer it in their native tongue, it goes back to English for the teacher. In New York City, a teacher could basically with one click, send a message out to all the parents, and it could be translated in 5 different languages without them ever having to do anything. And this starts answering lots of these different questions. And we get into cultural stuff that I could show, et cetera. Teachers get to see all the kids' names. And what they end up doing is, like they get sorting and filtering capabilities so that if they wanted to, just see the guys, the girls fade out. If I wanted to see the guys of color involved in activities, I can do these real complex comparisons as a teacher, and it becomes really easy and it's fun to do. I've got examples of seeing training where the teacher is saying, I can't stop, quote, playing with my classes because they're learning things. They're actually able to have information that they're able to work with. We also have the ability for parents to ask questions in their native tongue. You know, there's so many different things to it that makes it really compatible across the board. But then the next piece to this, which is where I'm kind of bringing this up, is what would the parent coordinator or the principal see? And what I'm looking at here is basically you would have access to all the teacher views. You can see a read only of everything. You get to see all the family backgrounds. You get to read all the communication. You see everything that's going on. Basically, you have the ability to see everything that's going on instead of playing he said, she said, and at the same time be able to communicate with the teachers via text messaging and et cetera. And we have a wealth of reports that no one's ever seen before, the metrics. And these include, you know, besides just looking at the percentage of family engagement, comparing this with student achievement and attendance with and without family engagement, percent of homework completed, which is an early warning indicator of whether we're improving or not, demographic and quartile splits. There's all kinds of information we can provide. And at One Green Apple, we also can provide the consulting to help you understand what you're looking at, for lack of a better expression. Why? And this really changes the entire paradigm because now we're able to actually track family engagement. So the question becomes down to is, you know, why are metrics important? Why are analytics important? Why do we do all this stuff? And I can give you all this stuff about finding the hidden issues and quantifying success. But the real reason comes down to respect. If you have the data to prove that how impactful you are, you get better results. And that's the idea, is to increase that role of the family, of the parent coordinator, and have the data to back that up in a way that is not invasive and ruins what's going on, but really be able to show the value of what we're doing. So this evolves the roles of the teacher, of the responsibilities of different roles. The teacher, they are responsible for maintaining the roles of family engagement. I didn't really be able to show that because of the technology hiccup. But basically, if we're able to track how many parents are engaged in the classroom or not, let's say that, you know, and we send out alerts, which is really cool on some stuff. Like if a teacher posts the homework, our system goes in, sees who didn't do the homework, and sends the parents a note. Johnny's late with his science homework. And even if you don't have a computer, it's a text message, you know, or the smartphone, you'll still receive a text message. Johnny's late with his science homework. And even if you're illiterate in your native tongue, you'll receive a phone call that says, Juan is, as an example, Juan is late with his science homework. Juan, get in here, and we start working on all these things. I can also, so when this happens, you know, they can get an alert where the child isn't performing according to what the parents' expectations are. And they're going to get that alert, and it's going to be an unhappy face. So they start with a happy face, and then things go bad and becomes an unhappy face. And they, for 2 weeks, they have this alert and they never log on. It goes from a happy face to a gray circle. Teachers can actually see a parent go on autopilot just when they're needed to be pulled in. And think about this in high school when you can't see whether the parents are engaged or not. You actually can see this, and that makes a really big difference. So we can set targets for family engagement, and it's easy for the teachers to see, make them responsible for hitting these targets. Let's say 75% family engagement or 50% family engagement. Because we can see this, we can also develop innovative protocols, you know, how they should respond, what they need to do to say the teacher did their job. And at that point, we can escalate the issue, if you will. Because of this, we can track success, evolve our standards, do all kinds of neat stuff. This also then means that we change the parent coordinator's role a little bit. Instead of being super, super in the trenches, which you still will be because that's the nature of wanting to do good, but you're the first level administration concerning family engagement. That means you provide that professional development for teachers and staff on how they do it. You can see how they talk to each other and to the parents and how they should be talking to them or what needs to be going on. You're overseeing that parent-teacher partnership to make sure it works properly. As we had mentioned about those other issues that are with the CBOs, you become the coordinator and liaison for those issues so that we see where this is. We provide the data, we teach you how to analyze it, et cetera, but that shows where we're being effective. This really changes the paradigm, if you will, across all this stuff. And, you know, you know, basically you can tell where we need more funds, where the issues are. And that's really exciting because now you have the data to back that up, if you will. So when we go back to this entire paradigm, the biggest difference, what we're working on now, which I can talk about further, is really how do we get community-based organizations working within this paradigm that the parent coordinator sits, if you will, almost as the administrator or the, as I mentioned, the liaison, and how does this work effectively? And in my next session, we're actually going to be talking with people from South Carolina, resources that you can use, and that would be helpful to move this forward. And that's what we're basically talking about, or where we're headed towards. So with all of this, developing this platform where we have all this data and all these reports and the ability to be transparent and everyone can see what's going on, you have all these lines of communication, which, as you can see, is way more complex, done really easily, but way better than what we'll say is a you would see out of our mind, where it's just a one-to-one relationship. Now you're really seeing a bigger picture, if you will. And if you think about it, it almost acts like a safety net for all the parents. That's how I kind of look at all those lines. And this means that we keep the focus on the family, we support the family, everybody gets better results. It's easier to do, everyone's happy. And I think this is the way we kind of start looking to move things forward. I'm just going to check real quick as I'm trying to pull up this stuff. There we go. If there's any questions or anything, please let me know. I'd like to talk about this.
We do have a couple of questions in
Sure.
the chat. I don't know if you want to.
I can answer them real quick. This is a good time. This is a good time to ask.
Okay, perfect. So we've got Lexi Jones. She's an evaluation coordinator, and it's question specific to this platform, the cost, the grades it's designed for. Is the platform available or piloted, evaluate with our local community? So here in South Carolina. Well,
that's a great multitude of questions. Number one, you have to make this cost effective. And we charge $12 a year per child, which actually fits it within most of the Title I budgets. And with ESSER, there's plenty of money to do this. Let me give an example of how this works. Let's say that we have a 500 student school. We would be charging at $12, $6,000. But if we are able to increase attendance just by 1%, we know what that looks like these days, that's equivalent to 5 kids, which at $15,000, we'll even use $12,000 per year coming in. That's equivalent to getting $60,000 of benefit for that cost of $6,000 without even doing anything. So the return on investment, to talk on this, is really important. The way we have to do things, where we talk about, having to meet the parents and have that discussion, we do that electronically, if you will. I mean, we're not going to take the place of everything, but generally the cost that is associated with all the things that we should be doing is roughly around $1,200. We're doing it for about 1/100th of the cost, which is really cool. What grades is this developed for? This is from basically K through 12. Across our gamut. I've been asked to look at things within the college communities, but we're not there yet. Is this available to be piloted, evaluated, and used? The answer is yes. I'm actually, as much as this is virtual, I'm sitting in North Charleston right now. I've been visiting school districts, and I'm happy, while I still have time down here, if someone wants to try to set something up, call me up just and see if we can't set something up to talk about this better. I know that if I set up the Zoom through my system, I can get the phone up, so you can see that at the very least, or anything. But yes, I'm actually down here looking at, we had started some things down in South Carolina. We had been doing some things with some charter schools, Richland 1, we did something at Florence 3. COVID just killed everything. We just stopped everything dead because there was just no way to be able to support it. But now we're coming out strong. This is something that's been grasped on nationally by national leaders. My advisory board is a veritable who's who, from the far right to the far left. I've got senior executives from the NEA all the way up to, state superintendents. The former mayor of Los Angeles has been pushing us to go into LA schools. Later on today, I've had the conference calls with them. New York City, the UFT, the teacher is actually, the head of the teachers union is pushing us to the chancellor to get in. So it's been pretty dynamic. The difference is they're urban and they're on the coasts. I want to do something, in South Carolina. It's a different environment. It speaks to the, I think, the greater issues within our community besides just urban. It's also rural. It's lots of the different issues. And so I'm very, very, very interested and passionate about making something here. That's also why I have that next panel discussion. And one of the people is Representative Robert Williams, which is the idea of how do we get this more money for you, I guess the best way to put it, within the state legislature. And how do you push for that? So that's where I'm at with that. I hope that answered the question in probably more detail than you wanted, but I'm happy to talk about that.
I don't see any additional questions, but I just want to let you know we have about 7 minutes total left in the session.
I'm wrapping up here.
Oh.
So this is really where I was getting to. A lot of times people hear things and go, that's really great. Someone should be doing this. And I'm saying, yes, you should be doing this. I'm asking you for a call to action. Number one is advocate. Change this dialogue, not just the parents who are already involved. This is for the have-nots as well. Just get everybody involved. You have to advocate that family engagement is important to our community. I need you to lead. You have to make this a priority in your community. You need to speak this up. You can't just be doing this as a position. There's a lot of paperwork involved. I understand that in federal programs, et cetera. I know we're involved in a lot of the little local stuff, but you need to speak up. You need to make this larger and sponsor. And this is exactly where we're talking about. Invite one green apple to your district leadership. And that is what I'm here for to be able to do. So with that, if there's no other questions, I'm done. But this is how you can contact me. If you want to talk to me, I am have another session, but even after that, call me even this, starting at noon, and I'll be happy to talk further, and maybe we can set things up, answer questions directly as well. And that's where I'm at. And Kathleen just put up a note where you can kind of go into some of the white papers we have online. There's plenty of information there as well.
Thank you so much. Are there any additional questions? You can feel free to raise your hand under the reactions, and if you want to say it, or you can drop it in the chat.
Okay.
All right, we have one question. How well does the system play with schools and CBOs?
This is another really good question that I should mention. We developed an executable with PowerSchool so that it takes to set up a district with the IT, with your IT, in a matter of hours, a couple of hours. We actually have something that overlays. We pull the information from PowerSchool. The teachers enter the information in their grade book the way they've always been doing it. This does not increase any of the additional work. This is where we're also working with community-based organizations like Communities in Schools, where we're developing a system that the information they put in is also pushed into our system, that it's also available for the teachers to be able to see and everything else, and instantaneous messaging back and forth. So it works really well. The next step would obviously be to build a platform for CBOs that they can use, because a lot of times their IT systems aren't up to where they should be, and maybe we can help build something for them. So that's where we're at with that. Okay.
All right, I don't see any additional questions. Thanks so much, Mr. Fratoni. And I did want to let the attendees know that this is part one of the chat about family engagement ecosystems. There is a part two immediately following at 11 o'clock. And just like Mr. Fratoni mentioned earlier, we will hear from some local leaders on how to implement this in the next session, and it will be in this room at 11 o'clock. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay.